He is supposed to be talking about the Rebuild Infrastructure Program, but after a weekend of protests, not only here in our area, but really throughout the nation, and also some big major court cases that are progressing through the legal system as of this morning, there's a lot of ground to cover there. So we'll probably dip in, dip out, but we'll take you there live just as soon as they begin. Let's take you to another place live and talk a little bit about what's going on with the government shutdown. There on Capitol Hill, it is day 20 now of the government shutdown. Still no end in sight. And isn't it beautiful in DC right now? But a lot of people not seeing any beauty in what's going on in this situation. Both sides are really dug in at this point in time. Historically, the longest shutdown ever was 35 days. And that was during President Trump's first term. So again, we are at 20 days now. More time goes by, more jobs are in jeopardy. The Congressional Budget Office estimates hundreds of thousands of federal workers could be furloughed during all of this. Many got a partial paycheck last week. We talked a little bit about that, but they could start going without full paychecks at the end of the month, somewhere around October 28th. So keep that in mind. Thousands more jobs could be eliminated during this period of time. A federal judge did temporarily block those cuts as of right now. But again, that's a temporary order. We had the communications director, if you'll recall, for the Greater Chicago Food Depository on Good Day Chicago this morning, speaking about the effects for recipients of SNAP benefits, because as of November, those could be in jeopardy if this shutdown continues to go on. We also talked to the director of a union that represents air traffic controllers last week right here on Chicago Live about the fact that many had to work two jobs during the last significant shutdown. So there are so many different effects that could all come from this government shutdown. Again, we are in day 20, no end in sight. Democrats want this to be resolved with health care. That's really what they're pushing for, some type of resolution to health care premiums that are set to go up at the beginning of the new year. But Republicans say while they can talk about that, nothing gets resolved without the government being open. So they want the government to be open and then for those talks to resume. Democrats want obviously the opposite. They want to go ahead and resolve that issue and then to open up the government. As of right now, again, no one is budging, no one is blinking, and we are on day 20 of the government shutdown. So we'll continue to keep you on top of what's going on with that, but it doesn't look like there's a resolution in sight anytime soon. You know, we have plenty of people that we've called on to talk to us today with some interesting conversations. I want to get you started here with what's going on with so many, millions of people having technological issues today, and I mean around the world. You could call it a case of the Mondays, these technological glitches that are happening, but it's a problem with Amazon's cloud computing service. It took down dozens of major online services. We're talking about the social media site Snapchat, the Roblox, Fortnite video games, the chat app Signal that so many have talked about, even the McDonald's app, if you were trying to get breakfast this morning. There were significant issues with this. And so I want to bring in now Dr. Alexander Yampolsky, the co-founder and CEO of Security Scorecard, to talk a little bit about what has affected so many people. Good afternoon to you.
Anita, good afternoon.
Really appreciate your time here. People may use services and not really understand the mechanics behind them. So let's just start with how AWS works, what we should know about AWS overall.
Sure. Well, think about AWS as a computer infrastructure, but instead of a computer being housed in your house or apartment, it's located in massive data centers. And so companies all over the world, like Starbucks, Fortnite, Coinbase, McDonald's, lease infrastructure from AWS to actually keep their services running. So when the infrastructure goes down, you could see massive widespread outages, as we're experiencing right now, because the infrastructure is having a glitch. All of a sudden, all the services that we're relying on become unavailable.
Yeah, and how extensive, when we say massive or use words like that, how extensive really was this disruption today?
This was very extensive. Major platforms like Fortnite, Snapchat, Venmo, Coinbase, airlines were affected. As a matter of fact, just as I was sitting here in my home office, My 16-year-old called me from school and said, Dad, I have great news. The test I was supposed to have in American government is canceled because we can't access the website due to AWS outage. And according to the research that Security Scorecard has done, today, 90% of the world's global attack surface is served by software from only 150 companies. So think about companies like Amazon. So you have a very significant systemic concentrated risk where if one of these companies goes down, it could have really massive disruption.
Yeah, you call it destruction, and your son would call it something totally different. It's interesting how different
He said
generations
it's the best day ever.
Yeah, it's a holiday for them. Some of the users I was reading of the company's Ring doorbell cameras and Alexa-powered smart speakers posted on a system called Down Detector that they weren't even working. So I'd really like you to touch on the kind of dangers an outage like this poses or creates for people.
Sure, well, absolutely. If you have an outage where your security system is not recording the information because it can't contact the infrastructure, then you could have a blind spot in your security perimeter and security defenses because it goes unattended. So now this outage, it's not related to cybersecurity, it's related to just uptime of a system. But this third-party interconnectedness that we experience in today's world, it's not just for uptime, but you also have cyber criminals and hackers also take advantage of these interdependencies where they can go break into software of one company and then use it as a jumping pot to go break into many other companies. So we really became very interconnected and reliant on each other, and that underscores a potential fragility in so much interdependence.
Yeah, I guess maybe talk a little bit more about that, because it seems like we're not headed in a direction of less reliability, but more and fewer companies that are handling all of this.
That is indeed the case. So we have fewer and fewer companies handling our infrastructure. So that means that a failure by one of these companies can affect and create a massive disruption. I think that's a signal that we need to change the mindset of how we design our systems. We need to shift into resilience in mind. Let's assume that sooner or later, the systems that we rely on are going to shut down or they're going to not operate. So how do we design our environment and our systems in a way where those systems can recover and very quickly get back online and running, even if the systems are compromised? As an example, you might go to your favorite coffee shop next to your house. What's your plan B if that coffee shop is not available? You might have another coffee shop down next door. So we need to build the same resilience and backup plans into how we operate in today's world and environment.
Yeah, really good point there. The company said that they were actively working on the problem today. How do you pinpoint a fix with something this widespread? Or even pinpoint the problem with something this widespread?
Yeah, so look, AWS is a great company. Amazon has a very resilient and robust infrastructure. So it does happen to the best of us. I believe that they publicized and said that the outage is attributed to some type of an internal monitoring system. So usually you have a number of protocols in place. People conduct simulations of what you do when an outage like this occurs, and I'm sure that Amazon has it in place. But I think as the world gets more and more complicated, it's harder to anticipate all the complicated interdependencies. Sometimes these things happen because we no longer understand all the nuances and all the complexity of the systems we rely on. So in that case, you just follow a protocol and you try to eliminate it one by one and say, hey, what do I know? What do I not know? And how do I just reduce the number of possibilities that led to it? And then try to get the system back online.
Yeah, and so you said an internal system. We don't believe this was a result of a cyber attack, correct? And how would you rule that out? Like, do you think we'd really know?
Yeah, so it's not believed to be a cyber attack based on what we know at the moment. Of course, look to really know, you need to do a rigorous retrospective and you have to do forensic analysis. But again, companies like AWS and Amazon, they have top-notch security teams and a lot of monitoring in place. But to really 100% rule it out, you have to do a root cause diagnosis and take a look at what your systems know and don't know. But based on what we're hearing, it's just a software misconfiguration issue. It's not a security related incident.
Do you think that we'll start to see more of these? You kind of mentioned like, all right, the technology moves swiftly. We're adding it, as quickly as possible because we all want it in some ways. It makes our lives easier. But a glitch like this, do we start to see more of these?
I believe that we're going to see more of these glitches because we became so interconnected in each other and the systems became complicated. For example, a refrigerator that you put into your house now may be speaking to the internet. The camera or the baby monitor you have in your house is connected to the network. The TV that you're using to watch a television program, it's a smart TV. So it's no longer just a TV, but it's a computer inside. And we're reliant on so many different parts of infrastructure all over the world that a breakage or a cybersecurity incident in any one of those parts could lead to a trickle-down domino effect in the rest of the infrastructure. As a matter of fact, in cybersecurity, even though this is not cybersecurity related, but in cybersecurity today, 60%, 60 of the data breaches happen due to negligence of a third party. So this third party dependence and fragility is a real risk as we look into the future.
So what do we as just everyday consumers need to keep in mind when these types of things happen?
So I think as a consumer, you have to just accept that that's the way that the world operates. You might want to have, for example, a backup plan in place. As an example, let's say, like again, using an analogy of a coffee shop. If you always go to the same coffee shop all the time, you might want to have a backup option of what other coffee shop you go. So similarly, maybe it's best practice to not store all your documents or all your data in a single file or in a single online system. But I think you need to just rely on trust the experts. I think as a consumer, you probably don't put all of your eggs in one basket, but usually, and as a company, you need to adopt resilience thinking and just do a lot of disaster simulation scenarios to prepare for outages or security incidents.
Yeah. What does your company prepare people for? Like, tell me a little bit about your company specifically.
Sure. So Security Scorecard helps measure and quantify risk. So we're used by 3,300 companies worldwide, where we provide almost like a credit score, but for cybersecurity. So a company might look at their third-party supplier and say, hey, the letter grade for that supplier is a C or a D. So that means they don't have a very good security hygiene. So we give information and insights to companies so that they can anticipate where a cybersecurity incident can arise, because knowledge is power. If you know where the weak links are, then you can prepare and become more resilient. So we're given this information on cybersecurity that didn't exist today. If you go drive a car, you know how fast you're driving from a speedometer. But in cybersecurity, we operate in blind. We don't know the security quantification and measures of companies we operate with. And so for any company in the world, we can give you that score and we can teach you how to make that company more resilient. And we're used by over 70% of the Fortune 100 companies today.
Really interesting stuff. Thank you so much for giving us your time and your expertise today.
Thank you so much, Anita.
All right, take care. Have a great afternoon. Everybody, it's 1:14 right now. We'll be right back. 1:16 right now. Thanks for staying with us, everybody. Dr. Adam Rogers is the CEO of NerveGen. He is a board-certified medical doctor from Emory College and Emory School of Medicine. He's here with me now to talk about a fascinating new development here. If you have ever known or loved someone who suffers a spinal cord injury, you know how quickly life can change and the uphill battle that it can sometimes be between will, access, healthcare, and insurance to regain some semblance of normalcy in their lives. So, Doctor, thank you so much for your time. As I understand it, there's an experimental drug that could help to improve that process where movement is concerned.
That is correct. That is correct. Before we get into that, Anita, and you hit on it a little bit, let me just talk to you and your audience about the size and scope of spinal cord injury, because everyone hears about it. People occasionally, you'll know someone with it, but there are over 300,000 individuals in the United States alone with spinal cord injury, and about 18 to 19,000 new cases per year. So it's an enormous problem. There are no pharmacologic treatments or what I would call drugs that individuals can take that will improve function. There is some stimulation, electrical stimulation, that is approved by the Food and Drug Administration for this issue. But other than that, there is nothing really available that's going to help individuals improve movement. And at NerveGen, we're a company that has developed a drug that we call NVG-291. It's a very simple injection in the abdomen. It's given once daily, where we give it for 12 weeks. It was tested recently in a phase 1b/2a clinical study that was approved. The study was approved by the Food and Drug Administration. It was administered at the Shirley Ryan Ability Lab in Chicago. And we had 10 individuals that were treated with the drug and 10 individuals that did not receive the drug as a control arm. The study went on for 12 weeks, and then we watched the individual patients for another 4 weeks after that. They also received outstanding physical therapy and occupational therapy, exercise treatment at the Shirley Ryan Ability Lab as well. And what the study showed was that with these individuals, and these are individuals with cervical spinal cord injuries, and cervical spinal cord is really, if you reach back behind your neck, that's the portion of your spinal cord that's the cervical area. And from cervical C7 higher, those are individuals that were allowed to enroll in the study. They needed to be motor incomplete, which means they had some firing of neurons from their brain to their hand to their legs. So they had some movement, but very limited hand and leg movement. So these are individuals that are very affected by their injury. What we saw was that there was a doubling of improvement in upper arm function, and then in hand function, which is vital to individuals with spinal cord injury. If you ask an individual with a spinal cord injury that's in a wheelchair, what is the most important? What would you gain back that's the most important? It's hand function, really, over even walking, which is most people out there wouldn't expect that. But if you think about it, what do you do with your hands? It's your ability to use a mouse, to type on a keyboard, to transfer yourself from a chair, your wheelchair, to a regular chair, to pick up a fork or a knife so that you can eat independently, even to hold your phone. And so hand function is vitally important for these individuals. And when we were testing hand function over the 12-week period, we had a 9.3x improvement in hand function against individuals that were getting exercise alone. And so I find that the results are really remarkable. And this is one of the first drugs, if not the only drug, that's shown improvement in functional improvement in individuals with a very severe spinal cord injury.
Yeah, and that hand movement was in what period of time?
Over 12 weeks. So they received the drug daily for 12 weeks, and it's a shot in the abdomen around their belly button or the umbilicus. And so it's very simple to administer. Either the individual or a caregiver was able to give it to them. So it's really quite simple. It's a simple, well-accepted administration.
And is this preferred, the injection that you were talking about, is that preferred over daily pills?
Well, there is no daily pill, and this is the best way to administer the drug so that it's able to impact the central nervous system.
Okay, all right. So tell me where you move from here. Like, what you're going to phase 2. What does that entail, and what can people expect from here?
Well, we're going to actually, Anita, we're going to actually move into a phase 3 study. So this study, and let me backtrack just a minute, and just so you understand the impact of this drug, we took individuals that were 1 to 10 years out from their spinal cord injury. These are not people that I just had a spinal cord injury within 5 days. I mean, so to be 10 years out from a spinal cord injury, and I think the average duration from the injury to the start of treatment was a little over 4 years. It's really amazing that we're able to see functional improvement in these individuals. So our next step would be a phase 3 study. It would be a larger study. It would be at more than just one site. The first site was obviously here in Chicago at the Shirley Ryan Ability Lab. We would do this in up to 60 sites around the country, just for ease of access for individuals to gain access into the study itself.
Yeah, and tell me, like, before this development, what is it maybe taking the place of? What would be the course of action, whether it's like cell therapies, or what is the course of action that this may speed up or altogether replace?
Well, other than some spinal stimulation, that there's a device called the ARC-X that's for upper limb function. Other than physical therapy and occupational therapy, there is really nothing for individuals with spinal cord injury. We often discuss the spinal cord injury community. We might say it's an underserved community. We actually looked at it as an unserved community. There just are very, very few treatments for individuals to improve function at this point in time. I have a lot of hope that this drug, if it continues to show the improvement that it's shown here at the Shirley Ryan Ability Lab in the first 20 individuals that we enrolled, I'm very, very confident that this will dramatically impact the lives of individuals that have spinal cord injury. I think it's going to provide an enormous hope and transform the lives of individuals. That's why I'm involved in the company. It's why I'm pushing so hard to continue to move this drug forward into additional clinical trials and in meetings with regulatory agencies.
Yeah, what is it going to take? I mean, when you talk about meetings with regulatory agencies, funding cuts, do those affect what you're doing right now?
Not necessarily. This is a study that we will fund. This is a study that it will go on, and as far as regulatory agencies, it's just being on the same page with them so that NervGen and the Food and Drug Administration have an understanding of what needs to be accomplished and how we need to get there. It's really just having a relationship with the organization itself.
I'd love to know, maybe even you could give me 1 or 2 stories of what people's lives were like before they even came in contact with you. What was the incident that put them in a situation where they needed your help?
Well, there's an individual here. There's an individual here in Chicago that was treated at the Shirley Ryan Ability Lab. He was going into college. He had a very unfortunate accident where he dove off a dock and suffered a cervical spinal cord injury. Obviously, he was over a year out from the injury, which qualified him for our study, and he received treatment from the drug. I'm not quite sure how far out he is now from the treatment itself, but this drug has improved his hand function. It has enabled him to start college. He's at the University of Illinois. He lives alone. He does have some help in the mornings and in the evenings, but he lives alone and is able to attend classes. So this drug has enabled him to improve his function, where he is now independently going to school and continue to live his life onward. And that's really what we're looking for in this company, is how do we transform your life so that you have more independent living? And that's the phenomenal part of this journey that we're on here at NervGen. It
really is. Okay, so would a person have to continue to get those shots for the rest of their lives, or how long is this overall process?
That's a really, really good question. For right now, we're focused on a 12-week course. I feel, we in the company feel that that's what's needed to get regulatory approval. It very well may be that down the road that an additional 12-week course is needed. But at this point in time, we're moving forward with 12 weeks.
Mm-hmm. Are there some other things? I mean, you talk about a non-served community or underserved community. Are there some other things on the horizon that you know of that could also be game changers for this community?
I wouldn't be surprised down the road if there's a combination of NVG-291 with some form of stimulation to help individuals. It's such a catastrophic injury. I believe that a multimodal approach is for many of the individuals is going to be the answer. It may not be for everybody, but there's a possibility. But that's time and testing, and you asked about hurdles. It's drug development is a time-consuming and expensive process, and we all just need to be patient. I'm not a person with a lot of patience, but we unfortunately need to have patience in this situation.
Yeah, I don't think most of us have that much patience in this day and time. But for someone who is in this situation, or even a loved one, their family members, when they hear of something that offers hope, I would imagine that ability to have patience through it is extremely difficult. I mean, we're speaking from the outside, but for someone on the inside, and you hear something that has hope, you want to hold on to that. You want to feel like this might be the answer. What is your conversation like with people about the possibilities here and the likelihood of things kind of going up and down?
Well, I have conversations multiple times a week with individuals who have had spinal cord injuries, are in rehabilitation facilities right now. I understand very well, and I was a practicing physician for almost 20 years. I understand where they are and what they want. My goal here is to bring a drug to market that's going to improve their lives and transform it. I listen to them. We get connected. I let them know where we are going as a company, just like I'm discussing with you today. And, we have those discussions. But a lot of it is just informing people about what's out there, what the future holds, and how they can help themselves along the way.
Okay, and when do you think you could have this to market?
Well, we anticipate that we're going to be starting the phase 3 study in the middle of 2026.
No outlook for when you hope it's all packaged up and ready?
We anticipate about 24 months, after the first patient enrolls.
Okay. All right. Anything else that you think people should know, or if maybe someone's listening and they're like, maybe this could be the answer for me, what do they need to do?
Well, there is an active ongoing study at the Shirley Ryan Ability Lab right now, which is enrolling individuals up to 90 days after a cervical spinal cord injury, and they have to be motor incomplete. And so if you're in that situation, or you have a loved one who's in that situation you're watching, I would recommend contacting the Shirley Ryan Ability Lab and discussing with them the possibility of enrolling in the trial. So it's a second arm of our trial that's looking at individuals with a subacute injury.
Well, Shirley Ryan definitely does wonderful work. I hope that you're successful if this is really going to help a lot of people. Thank you so much for taking the time to explain it to us.
Thank you for your time, Anita.
Have a great day. 1:30 right now. We'll take a quick break and we'll be right back on the opposite side of it. Welcome back, everyone. 1:32 right now, and you often hear us talk about food deserts or prescription pharmacy deserts or things of that nature, but not about news deserts. And if you think about conversations that have been had over the last few months about funding cuts for public broadcasters, I'm reading a report here that says news deserts have hit a new high, and 50 million people have limited access to local news. This is according to a new study here. I want to bring in now Professor Tim Franklin from Northwestern University to talk a little bit more in detail about this. Thank you so much for joining me.
Sure. Thanks for having me on. It's great to be with you.
Can you talk about how things are jumping to record levels this year?
Yes. So we've been tracking for the past 20 years, basically, the number of local news outlets in the U.S. And what we've seen consistently, and which is accelerating over the past year, are the closures of local newspapers. And local newspapers still are the primary way that people get local news and information across the country. So this year, we found there are 213 counties in the U.S. with absolutely no local news, no newspaper, no public broadcasting, no digital-only sites, no ethnic media. And then there are more than 1,500 counties in the U.S. that have only one remaining news source. So that means when you add it all up, that there are about 50 million Americans that have little to no access to local news. And the business model for newspapers especially has just imploded over the past 10 or 11 years.
Yeah, and this is a crisis that in some ways is maybe it being exacerbated this year, but not necessarily a new trend. It seemed like wallets were having to tighten for the last several years.
Yeah, this has been happening as a result of changes in technology, people shifting to online news consumption being the biggest, advertising dollars following readers to online platforms and to social media. So all of that as a result means that we have smaller audiences, we have less advertising revenue. When there's less advertising revenue, it makes it harder to run these local businesses. And, you know, the one thing that we saw in the research this year that is different than in past years is that a lot of the closures were small independent publishers, small independent owners across the country. And those are the very people that you want to keep, right? Because they're the ones who've been doing it for decades. They're closest to their communities.
Yeah.
They know their communities, their history, the context of what's happening, the people there. So that was pretty alarming.
Yeah. Do we think that there could be a rebound, or are we just overall restructuring?
You know, I say that we're in the midst of this historic transformation of how people, of how news is consumed, produced, distributed, and paid for. And I think that we're in kind of the middle innings of this historic transition. And you know, I think in some ways it's getting worse. We also had some positive signs in this year's report. You know, there have been 300 plus local news startups in the past 5 years. We're seeing growth in nonprofit news organizations. The problem, though, is that we're not replacing the newspapers that are being lost at the same rate. And many of those startups are in metro areas. They're not in suburban or rural areas of the country.
Yeah, and then maybe talk a little bit about the fact that if you lose legacy media, that trust factor in a lot of the startups. Obviously, not all startups are bad or anything of that nature. I'm not trying to say that. But it is a different landscape that we're dealing with now.
Yeah, for sure. You know, and trust is obviously a huge issue in the news industry writ large these days. And we just did a comprehensive survey of residents in the Chicagoland area, a 14-county DMA. And we did find, and this shows up in other studies, that people trust local news much more than they trust national news. National news trust ratings are like in the high 20 percentiles, somewhere in there. And for local news, it's often 60% or even more in some studies. So there is a level of trust with local news that doesn't exist with national news. These are your neighbors. These are your people you see at PTA meetings, at the Little League Diamond, and so it's these are not folks motivated by ideology; they're motivated by their community and serving their community.
Yeah, and speaking of community, what risk do you think it is to the community when you lose these outlets?
You know, there's now, it's an interesting question. There's now been research that shows that in news desert or low information communities that civic participation goes down, that turnout in local elections goes down, the number of candidates seeking local office goes down, that local government spending goes up because the journalists are the watchdogs kind of monitoring what's happening in those communities. And also there's even a study that shows corruption rises in these areas because the journalists aren't there kind of minding the store. But more than that, you know, local news, I think, is the glue that binds a community together. It's a community that sees itself through local media. And you know, that sense of isolation that I think is growing in parts of the country is exacerbated by the loss of local news.
Yeah, and transparency, you know.
Oh, yeah.
So you're at Northwestern. When students come through and they say, you know, I want to be a journalism major, are you looking at them funny these days, or what are your words to them about it?
No, that's a great question. Look, you know, first of all, Medilla's full. We have full enrollment in both our undergrad and graduate programs this year. And so, you know, the students are very entrepreneurial. They're very mission driven. And they seem undaunted by some of these economic headwinds. And I think they also see the potential of what might be next in news. For example, in the study that I mentioned that we just did, content creators were among the highest ranked sources of local news. So these are folks on TikTok or Instagram or YouTube or Substack that are producing local news, and they're building, in some cases, very large audiences. So, you know, I think news is going to be delivered and produced differently, for sure, than it is now. But the students, I think, are not. To this point, they're undaunted by this change.
Yeah, my nephew, when he was in college, had some glasses that said producer on them, and I got so excited thinking he wanted to do like what we do, and he had a totally different view of well, where he was going with that than what I would have thought. Their thought process is just different. So what overall do you want people to take from this study and maybe react to?
You know, I think that we're in a local news crisis. I think it's serious, and I think it has serious implications for our communities across the country and for civic participation. I also think there are some encouraging signs, as I was saying, that show that we may come out the other side with different types of local news. I think that you've referenced the cuts in public broadcasting, which I think are going to worsen the local news crisis over the next couple of years because many of the hardest hit stations are in smaller rural parts of the country. So I worry about that. And I do see some encouraging signs. Philanthropy is stepping up in a big way to support local news because they see the consequences that loss of local news can have on communities. And I also think we're seeing public policy in some places, including Illinois, which last year passed a package of bills to try to help local news in this state.
Yeah, and that was kind of going to be where I asked you about what people can do to support local news, and especially in rural areas.
You know, subscribe, become a member. If it's a nonprofit, you know, go to events that the local news organization is hosting or organizing in your community. And, you know, on this report, if you go to the Medill Local News Initiative website, you'll see the report. We also created a predictive model that shows areas that are at risk of losing local news. So go to that site, look at the map, and if your community is among those that is at high risk of losing local news, now is the time to act before it's too late. Talk to your community leaders, talk to local community foundations, you know, talk to potential investors. But it's much easier to prevent a news desert than it is to fill one.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Were there some surprising areas on there?
You know, yes, I think that we are seeing legacy news organizations that are successfully reinventing themselves. We have this feature called Bright Spots in local news, and there are examples of some local legacy news organizations across the country that have made the pivot and transformed successfully to a digital business model. And I should say that although we profiled them in past years, not this year, that Block Club Chicago, I think, is one of the most successful digital
Yeah.
startups in the country. In the last 5 or 6 years, they've been consistently growing. They've diversified their revenue base. They're filling an important void in the market with hyper-local news on Chicago neighborhoods. And I think they're doing a great job.
They really are doing a great job, and that's why we love to partner with them. We love the days when they come on. They get very detailed into what's happening in the neighborhood, so we appreciate them. I really appreciate you also, Professor Franklin.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. Look forward to talking to you again.
Okay, thank you. Look forward to it as well. It's just about 1:45, everybody. Let's take a quick break, and I'll join you on the opposite side of it. Welcome back, everyone, and look at the beautiful day that we have here in the city of Chicago, giving you a live look at the bean, that sun shining off of it, all of those folks out there trying to grab a picture while they're in town, and it's a little chilly. If you look down, you can see a lot of jackets on, folks. It's finally feeling like fall out there, and you can see the leaves are changing as well. So we love to see it, and there's much more where that comes from, it looks like, for this week. A lot of sunshine and cool temperatures. Let's talk about another issue that's going on here. You know, we started off the broadcast talking about the government shutdown, now in day 20. The White House has been canceling or adding new conditions to a lot of grants in the meantime for Democratic priorities and Democratic leaning states and cities like Chicago. And today, the city of Chicago, together with 8 other local governments, has filed a federal lawsuit challenging those efforts affecting federal emergency grant funding. They call them unlawful conditions. In fact, they say that the conditions are 1, constitutional separation of powers in terms of violations. They say by posing these new funding conditions, the Trump administration is usurping the spending authority of Congress. They also say it's arbitrary and capricious. The new conditions, they say, are unsupported by any reason, explanation, and are not tethered to the purpose of the grants. We have a response here from Mayor Johnson this morning. He says that Chicago will not stand by while the federal government weaponizes emergency funding to attack our values. Chicago will always uphold the importance of our diversity. Ensuring that all Chicagoans have an opportunity to succeed is not discrimination. It's just basic fairness that we all fight to ensure ensure our first responders have the tools they need, that our commitment to equity and inclusion remains strong, and that we receive every federal dollar intended for public safety. These DHS conditions would require the city to certify that they do not operate any programs that advance or promote DEI, DEIA, or discriminatory equity ideology, or lose funding. So it's a continued fight. Again, the city of Chicago now filing this legal challenge against the Trump administration over what they deem as unlawful restrictions on federal emergency grants. We'll continue to watch what happens with that proceeding and several others that are making their way through the legal process right now. But you know, over the last several years, it has seemed like we've seen more and more peanut allergies. And now maybe the tide is turning. Maybe. Let's go ahead and bring in our next guest. We have Ruchi Gupta, who is going to talk to us a little bit more about what we're seeing now and the possibilities as we move forward. Thank you so much for your time, Dr. Gupta.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
This is your area of expertise. I know you've written a lot on this, and you work with Northwestern and also Lurie Children, so we appreciate what you do on a regular basis. Do you feel like my characterization is correct that, you know, it felt like for a while we were just seeing it everywhere? If you dropped a child off at school, that there were, issues connected to what could be brought into the school because of peanut allergies, and maybe there's some turning of the tide.
Yes, and that is our hope. So food allergies have been increasing. We call it an epidemic in the US, and impacts about 1 in 13 kids, about 1 in 10 adults, 33 Americans. So yes, it has been something on the rise. But now we have prevention efforts. And by that, I mean early introduction of peanut products. And this is a new prevention effort where if you are watching and you have a new baby, you know, it's important to know that now we recommend early introduction of peanut products around 4 to 6 months when they're ready to eat, when they're showing signs to be ready. Then you introduce peanut products like peanut butter, thin it out with breast milk, formula, applesauce, and start feeding it to your baby and keeping it in their diet. And what we have seen with that is we can hopefully turn the tide, as you said, and decrease the incidence of peanut allergy in infants. And not only peanut, we see this with egg, you can do it with milk in the form of yogurt, and other common food allergens early in life.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask you about that. Is it that we've been focused on peanut allergies, or where do they stand compared to maybe some of those other early in life issues that could really cause prolonged problems down the road?
Yes. So we say a top 9 food allergies, and peanut is definitely been number 1 for a long time. But other common ones are milk and egg, as I mentioned, the tree nuts, so things like cashews and walnuts and other tree nuts, shellfish, finfish, soy, wheat, and sesame as the 9th most common allergen. So the studies that prompted this early introduction and this prevention were done on peanut, and then there's been some done on egg. We're doing a large study here looking at the top 8 food allergens, but really what I want to point out is for new parents, just feed your baby foods that are common in your household. Try to get peanut products in there, egg, milk, and some of these other allergenic foods as you see fit. It is important to get that diversity of diet in infants and to have fun with it. I don't want to medicalize it too much for parents, but just get it into your babies. Keep these in their diet. That first year of life is very, very important.
Mm-hmm. How does a peanut allergy actually work? Like in the body, how does it work?
So how does it work? So that's a really good question. So peanut allergy, or any of these food allergies, they're immune mediated conditions. So when your body recognizes that food, they think it's an invader and they go on attack. So your immune system goes on attack. And what happens is you have symptoms. Common symptoms include things like hives, vomiting. It can impact any organ system. So you can get trouble breathing. You can even have a drop in blood pressure. So it's important to recognize those signs. Now, I don't want to scare anyone. So in infants and babies, especially when you're feeding that food initially, the majority of kids, over 95%, will have no issue, and they tend to love these foods. Introduce it slowly, though. So take a little bit, put it on their lips, let them lick it, observe them, give them a little bit more. Go slow the first time. And a lot of times you can use a barrier cream around their mouth, because a lot of people stop eating it because they get a little bit of a rash around their mouth. That's more of a contact dermatitis. So just another tip.
What would be a barrier cream?
Yeah, so anything you're using on the rest of their body. So, common barrier creams that you find in the stores, Aquaphor, Eucerin, Cetaphil, anything, Vaseline, just something to protect their face is really important. Other really common tips, if they start having signs, you'll usually see the vomiting and the hives first, and then call your pediatrician or get them to care to see if they're actually having an allergic reaction. The other thing I do want to mention is the number one risk factor for food allergies is eczema, or dry, broken skin. So really protect your baby's skin and get to your pediatrician if you think they do have this, so that you can protect that skin barrier. And then if they do have it, then it's even more important that they get some of these foods into their baby early.
Yeah, I think there are so many things that, like, we hear a long period of time, you'll hear this is bad for you, and then some studies may show that things could change and be different. We can look at it differently, and it becomes hard to decide, like, how quickly should I react to this? Maybe I should wait and see how others react to it, and then I jump in the pool. But what has been the reaction from parents that are hearing this?
Yeah, so that's a really good point, because in early, year 2000, the American Academy of Pediatrics said don't introduce peanut products to your baby until age 3. And that was done because we saw this big epidemic and rise in peanut allergy. And now we're saying introduce it early. So it is very confusing. And I can tell you on a personal note, I was amongst those when my daughter was born in 2006, where it was don't introduce peanut allergies to your infant, and she does have a peanut allergy and tree nut allergies. But then the guidelines changed, and the guidelines changed because we finally have data, and we have data showing that early introduction, getting it into your gut early, can get your immune system to recognize it as safe. And so that's what's really happening when you're introducing these foods early. And so we flipped the recommendations, and I don't want to add fear to people, because just getting food into your baby's diet, there's nothing wrong with that and nothing scary about it. And knowing what to do in case you do see a reaction happening is very important. So I appreciate that, because people do fear it, and we have people coming into clinic wanting to feed it there for the first time out of fear, which is also something we need to be aware of. So it is a safe thing to do. Just be conscious of those symptoms. Usually they'll happen really, really quickly within the first 5 to 10 minutes of eating the food. But the other big important thing is, once they eat it and they like it, then keep it in their diet at least 2 to 3 times a week.
And if they do show a reaction, what are the courses of action?
Yes, so if they do have a reaction, it's important to get them medical care. So get them to the emergency room, or get them into your pediatric office as soon as possible so they can be assessed. And then they will probably get them over to an allergist who will do testing, confirm it is or is not a true food allergy, and then help with the management and get them the epinephrine auto-injector they need. But now I just want to also point out, it's a really interesting time in food allergy, because we have prevention, but we also have new treatments. So it's also important to see if your infant does have a food allergy early, there are treatments now that we can utilize to get them to maybe even reverse that food allergy early. So lots of new things happening in the food allergy world, and a lot of options for families.
Yeah. Are there some, I want to do some myth busting now, because we're not all, not everyone has access to someone like you on a regular basis. Are there some things, some misnomers out there that you want to take a moment to say, it's not that, or this isn't that?
Oh, wow. Okay, yeah, let's do it. So some things, especially in older kids and adults, when you eat a food, a lot of times people think they have a food allergy. We found that 1 in 5 adults and 1 in 10 parents of kids said they had a food allergy. But a lot of times when you eat certain foods, things like milk, wheat, it can be another condition, right? So lactose intolerance, for example, is very common. So a big myth is really figuring out what you have. If you have bloating and stomach pains, it may actually be an intolerance and not a true food allergy. This is why it's so important to get to your doctor, to get to an allergist, to get the right testing to know what you have. Because if you have an intolerance, a lot of times there's things you can do. You can take a medication to be able to still eat that food. Versus if you have a food allergy, there are also other things you can do. Like I said, now we have treatments and different options. My goodness, there's so many myths with symptoms and determining what kind of food condition you have. Let me think. Other myths. I think it's really important to know that if you're having an allergic reaction, a myth is now that you just give Benadryl right away, or you give one of those antihistamines, and that's not the recommendation anymore. So right now, unless you're having a very, very mild reaction, just a little bit of a rash, the recommendation is to give that epinephrine, especially if your allergic reaction is increasing or turning into anaphylaxis, which means getting more severe. Giving epinephrine right away is really important.
What about a trend of adults microdosing?
Oh, that's interesting. So, as I mentioned, 1 in 10 adults have a food allergy, and so it's a very common thing. Microdosing is something we term as oral immunotherapy, which is a treatment for food allergy, actually. But I would say do it with an allergist. It's important potential treatment. So what you do is you take small amounts of the food and you increase it over time, and your body starts recognizing it and building up a threshold. So maybe if you could eat less than like a tiny bit, once you start on oral immunotherapy, you can get up to like 1 peanut or 2 peanuts. And what's good about that, it's not a cure. So I want to point that out. It's not a cure, but it helps you in the sense that you may not have that cross-contact allergic reaction, or if you accidentally ingest a little bit of it, it will protect you. So I wouldn't do it at home, but I do think it is an important treatment in the office with an allergist. And we also, go ahead.
Yeah. Go ahead. No. Finish your thought.
No, I was going to say there's new approved treatments. We have anti-IgE biologic treatment, which is a shot once or twice a month. But what it does, it increases your threshold on all of your food allergens. So not just one. So OIT, like what you were saying, the microdosing, it's specific to the food. So say you do that for peanut, for example. But then the biologic is food agnostic. So it just it's an anti-IgE. So it works the same for all food. So that's another option that you can talk to your allergist about.
And do we see a difference in ethnicities in terms of reaction to peanuts or these allergies?
Yeah, that's also such good questions. So we do. And what we see is that food allergies do impact every race and ethnicity. It's not, biased by any means. Everyone has pretty equal rates of it. But what we do see is differences in the type of food allergy. And we see this around the world, actually, in different cultures. Depending on what the foods that they commonly eat, we do see higher rates of food allergies. So that can change. So, for example, just Asians have more tree nuts a lot of times. We see shellfish and finfish a lot of times more in Black and Latinx groups. So there's different foods that impact different races and ethnicities, but it does impact everyone.
Very interesting stuff. I could keep asking you questions all day, but we are waiting a press conference. So I'm going to go ahead and let you go. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Oh my gosh, thank you. I appreciate your interest in this.
Absolutely. We'll have to have you back. It's 2:02, everybody. Let's take a break and we'll be right back. Okay, as we anticipated, Governor Pritzker is now speaking at a press conference here. This is a press conference specifically about Rebuild Illinois in the Metro East, some major investments there into infrastructure. Let's listen in, and then we might dip out for a bit after that. Okay, we've been listening in there to Governor Pritzker as he's speaking at this press conference for Rebuild Illinois. As some others speak, and this is the head of IDOT here in the state, we're going to kind of move on, but we'll get back to that press conference as soon as reporters begin to ask questions. They are going to open it up for questions at the end. But you heard Governor Pritzker talking about Rebuild Illinois being one of the most comprehensive infrastructure plans in the nation. He said that there are improvements in many areas to make people's lives easier, reaching all counties. Really emphasize the employment aspect of this that's come from the projects that are going on. He says more work still needs to be done, and he's sorry, not sorry for the inconvenience in between getting to where he's trying to go with all of these different projects. But he said this year specifically, he's directed $400 million to go directly to support local infrastructure. He said right now we are a top 5 state for infrastructure infrastructure in the nation, and he wants to be number one. Again, that press conference is continuing on. So just as soon as they get to the question and answer portion, we're going to go back to it and listen in some more and see some other topics that may be discussed during that particular time in front of those dignitaries there. But there have been several different big court cases that have gone in before a judge today, and I want to bring in our political reporter Paris Schutz to talk about specifically the ICE hearing that took place this morning. Paris, thank you so much for taking time out of your day. So this is a judge who has, this is maybe the third time that the Trump administration has brought their attorneys from the DOJ before this particular judge. And today it was supposed to be the ICE field director for our area that then was reassigned as of Friday, correct?
Yeah, it's kind of a game of musical chairs, but this is federal judge Sarah Ellis, who is calling ICE and CBP, Customs and Border Protection, back in to court with respect to the order she gave a couple weeks ago that they had to stop, using tear gas and munitions to, fire at members of the public and members of the media. She then said that they have to wear body cams, and she basically had alleged that they're not following her orders, so she called this emergency court hearing to come in. And the local field director of ICE that's been here since the start of Operation Midway Blitz, he was kind of abruptly reassigned back to Washington, D.C. The one that came in, I spoke with, I did an interview with on Friday. The new field director was actually here for a year before Operation Midway Blitz, so now he's back in his post. And it's a fascinating hearing because what's coming out of this is that folks don't really understand, and I would say that the Department of Homeland Security has really obscured a lot of this. It's like, what group is doing what? You've got ICE, and that is for 25 years been their function, which is to operate in the interior of the country to act on unlawful immigration. And then you've got Customs and Border Patrol, and their operations have always been along the border, but now they're here as part of Midway Blitz. This high-profile Commander Bavino is leading their charge. And what's coming out of this hearing is something that I've been seeing and witnessing more, in that it is that the high-profile stuff, like the raid in South Shore, that was done by Customs and Border Protection officers, not ICE. And many of the really, high-profile things have been CBP and not ICE. So in the southeast side of Chicago, Albany Park, and the public is kind of conflating ICE and CBP for good reason, because the government has not been very clear on who it is. And so I think you kind of see this divide here in terms of ICE has been doing this work for decades. CBP is new to coming to a place like Chicago and carrying out deportation in the middle of an inner city, and we've seen the problems with that. The tear gassing, the pulling people out of cars, and the judge is clearly perturbed, and that's why she called them back in today.
Yeah, and when you talk about pulling people out of cars, we had those 11 drivers who were pulled out of their cars at O'Hare over the weekend. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Well, they, and they say this was on a tip, but they certainly went and targeted the rideshare drivers, that are going to O'Hare. And clearly, if their goal is numbers and getting as many undocumented immigrants as they can, they feel that hanging out at a place like O'Hare, where there are a lot of rideshare drivers, and many of them are immigrants, whether they're legal or not, we don't know, but that was clearly a pool of people that they felt that they could grab a lot of people from. And then Mayor Johnson announced some kind of protections, at O'Hare, but it's, the federal government has kind of said that they have supremacy, they have their laws trump the local laws on this. So it's unclear how much, the mayor can really do to protect rideshare drivers out there.
Yeah, and when you bring up the mayor, the city of Chicago filed this legal challenge now against the Trump administration over unlawful restrictions of federal emergency grants, what they deem as unlawful conditions. Address that a little bit.
Well, there's been many of them. I mean, they say there have been a bunch of public safety grants that have been held up. You see in the Chicago Housing Authority right now, The Department of Housing, the federal Department of Housing, is holding up grants because they want to make sure that there's no DE&I, diversity, equity, inclusion, involved in the way that they're operating. Although that would be a very difficult case to make with the Chicago Housing Authority. A large percentage of recipients of housing in Chicago are Hispanic or African American. So I'm not sure the federal government is trying to prove in that, but they've withheld funding, like they have to colleges and universities. They've withheld funding to Chicago. For example, the Red Line extension, they wanted to withhold that, even though it's, everything's been inked on that, but they want to make sure that there isn't DE&I preference in the contracting of that, which there is. I mean, the city has a policy of like subcontracting and contracting with minority or women-owned businesses, a certain percentage of them, which the federal government claims to be DE&I. But over and over, these laws have held up in court, and every time the federal government has tried to withhold funding based on this kind of pretext, the judges have overwhelmingly ruled in favor of the city that you can't hold up this funding because you don't like, hiring policies that are happening, or, whether people of color are getting some kind of preferential treatment. It's not an excuse to hold up money that's already been committed.
Yeah, and so we see this volley, this back and forth between the city, the state, and the federal government here, going back to the hearing today. So it's supposed to be the Customs and Border Patrol Deputy Incident Commander Kyle Harvick and the ICE Deputy Field Office Director Sean Byers testifying instead of the Chicago ICE field director who was reassigned last week. What are we anticipating getting from this? I know the judge said she was gravely concerned last week that her ruling wasn't being followed. What more do we expect today?
Well, I mean, I think more clarity on how federal immigration agents are going to operate at Broadview and in general. And we've already seen that they've committed to having their agents wear body cameras. The other part of that is, will they be turned on while they're acting? I mean, that's the other part of the order that you have to ask them about. And they basically testified that their policy has been to give their agents, make sure their agents give 3 warnings before they use those kinds of munitions. We're going to warn you 3 times. You got to get off of this property. You got to disperse. You got to let officers conduct their business, or else we will tear gas you. And they say they're doing that is their policy. And so you see the judge kind of asking questions. Well, what about Reverend Black? The priest who was out there who got rubber bulleted in the head. And what they said was, well, what you don't know, what the video doesn't capture, is we gave him multiple warnings to get off the property, and he didn't comply. So that's the kind of information that we see, and I think what'll come out of this is more clarity on what the policy is going to be for federal agents for A, body cams, and B, when they use some kind of force against protesters.
Yeah, and she called them back in after the incident that we watched even live that happened on the city's southeast side. Right. And there was that conversation as to, okay, did they give a warning that day before we saw that big plume of smoke over really that whole block? Were they peppered with rocks or eggs, as they said? There's a lot of he said, she said on these.
Right. And what you see from the officers testifying, because they're under oath, it's like they say, well, that's my understanding, that they were pelted with objects before they deployed this tear gas. So we don't know. It is he said, she said. And a video on social media only gives us a little snapshot, but it doesn't give us the full context of what happened. So they claim that their understanding is, tear gas, these warnings were given before tear gas was deployed. But, I spoke last week with former police superintendent Eddie Johnson, who said, tear gassing is not an effective crowd control policy. It doesn't really help. It can be dangerous, but it doesn't really help the situation. It disperses people, and then they just come at you from all different angles. The crowd control policy that police have often used is they kind of like link together and hold the line against protesters and they'll start pushing back. And then if someone gets unruly, they do have a club that they can hit them with if they're struck first. And then the other thing Johnson said was, if we see someone throw something at us, we just go grab that person and detain them. We don't do tear gas. So, you know, there's the judge's orders on tear gas, but then there's the sort of the overall policing strategy of, like, you know, local police have long said that they've not used these kind of these tactics because they're not effective, according to Police Superintendent Eddie Johnson. So when you see Customs and Border Patrol using these tactics, and it's coming out in this court hearing that they're not very well trained. Well, they're not trained at all in crowd control or de-escalation or use of force policies. They're trained to, you know, search for runaways on the border and detain them, and that's much different than going into you know, an inner city neighborhood and going into a store and identifying people and then detaining them. And this is where you see a lot of commotion happening.
Yeah, and of course we've seen a lot of commotion out at that Broadview ICE processing center. You were out there on Friday. I'm seeing here there were 15 people who were arrested on Saturday there. There weren't many people who were arrested on Friday. Did you see the tactics? Obviously, some of that changing as a result of federal orders as well. Did you see the tactics maybe being more productive out there?
Yeah, what I saw changing, Anita, when I was out there, is I didn't see any federal agents, you know, engaging in crowd control or guarding the facility. It was all Illinois state troopers and local police officers. Tactics that we talked about, you know, when some of those scuffles broke out, it's because the officers were, you know, holding the line. They were pushing back. They're saying, you're past curfew. You're on, you know, property that has not been designated the protest zone. We designated the protest zone, and that's where that's where, you know, the contention happens, and then arrests are made. But clearly you see local and state police who are trained in this thing using different tactics. You don't see the tear gassing anymore or the rubber bullets. They are not using that. And I did not see federal agents engaging in any kind of crowd control anymore, which might be, you know, a permanent change. You know, it might be that now that state troopers have come to do this, that the immigration agents don't have to.
Yeah, it's kind of like Superintendent Snelling talking about the fact that our rules of engagement are different from their rules of engagement. So what else are you working on for your show?
You know, Anita, I'm sorry, you were muted on, what was the beginning of that?
I was just saying that it was similar to when Superintendent Snelling said our rules of engagement are different from their rules of engagement. But then I was just asking you, what else are you working on for your show?
Yeah, thank you for asking. So we're going to do a little bit more of our interview exclusively last Friday with the new ICE field director in Chicago. And, you know, we talked about Broadview and how that is not a holding facility. It's more of a processing facility. And then, you know, suspects get taken somewhere else. He defended, you know, ICE's actions and the fact that they don't indiscriminately just target people. That's more Customs and Border Patrol. And so we're going to talk about that. We're going to, we have the Dean of Medill School at Northwestern to talk about this big press freedom symposium they're having this week. You know, obviously this is a big topic right now, freedom of the press. So we're going to talk about his reactions to everything that we're seeing. And on a completely different topic, we're talking with local emergency room officials at Northwestern, I believe, that have seen a massive spike in emergency room visits due to scooters. Oh, those pesky scooters that I admittedly use, you know, to get around. That a lot of people have gotten hurt on them. So we're gonna dig into that.
Yeah, lots of municipalities trying to deal with those, especially for young people being on them. Just one question about your interview with the ICE field director, the new one. Did he at all speak about why people aren't being allowed in to see it?
He did. He basically said that in the past they had let officials in, but right now, because of the sheer volume of the operations and the people they're bringing in, it's not feasible, in his words, to have people come in and tour it and see it. Now, if you talk to Senator Durbin, said, well, what are they hiding? Why won't they let us see it? Clearly a lot of skepticism there, but that was the director's kind of defense of, you know, kind of keeping this closed off from any kind of oversight.
All right, Parashutz, we appreciate you. We'll see you for the Chicago Report.
Sounds good. Thanks, Anita.
All right, thank you. 2:28, let's take a break and we'll be right back. Right now, and let's go back to that press conference in Fairmont City with Governor Pritzker and listen in for a little bit more.
How difficult is it to from as you've seen the president of the United States all across the country, has cut projects from states, Democrats and Republican states. I know that they just reported from Democratic states. Projects, I mean, the president doesn't live up to prior applications where the Congress has passed a law to increase that appropriation. There's other issues of the time, whether that was even himself of the way that's what he was instructed to don't look at teachers in hospital. I always have. I don't look at teachers for most of their perspective. Think about they brought it to the teaching kids our future. So, obviously, whoever they elected as a third, I think we have increased K-12 education funding by 33%. That's $2.8 billion. I'm not saying that's enough. We can tell you we've got schools that have more resources. We're sure to put money into those schools. So there's more to do, but it's not like we've been neglecting schools that are able to take stuff before they do. We have to continue to invest in schools. And by the way, our funding of schools, the standards that we set are working. Let me tell you. When I took office, we were 22nd in the country. History, our test scores. 22nd out of 50 states. Today, we're 50th. In reading, when I took office, we were 15th in the country. With grade reading scores. We're now 2nd. So, people who want to complain about education in the state should look at this. And at the same time, we know we're going to do our best to continue to learn to make that funds. Massively, the Department of Education, Washington, and special education funding, those are the kids most need. Those are the kids who need the most help. We need help from the federal government to make sure that we're funding those programs. I'm afraid that some privatize public education. We also private schools. I hope you do a good job. I know they do a good job. I hope you do a good job. The public education system was for every kid, but for my great qualified, great public education, years like that, for the party, and a good public education is what every kid deserves. Yes. Peace. We haven't heard anything because they typically put these cases hard and so I don't want to say that every reason constitution so that anything other than to protect from the not to fight things, not to do it with the violence so I mean, I don't know what the results of the school will be, but I'd say every court along the way because they know that the high school staff are not so the base school it should be. I want to say those Republican governors like this who are saying that almost as far last when President Biden tried to try to pass the vaccines federal all the governors, all of those governors, Ray Rodney, all the Republicans, and all the Democrats, all spoke together and said, you could come to this thing. Well, the other thing is that it's like the
Okay, we were listening in there again to Governor Pritzker. Now, the press conference is actually about Rebuild Illinois, the infrastructure project, and his big news out of there was that this year he's directed $400 million to directly support local infrastructure this year, that we are a top 5 state for infrastructure development, and he wants to be number 1. But in that question and answer portion, obviously when you open it up to reporters, they have questions about a lot of other things, but they know that the governor is going to be there at the mic, open to questions. And so they asked about the Voting Rights Act that is now up before the Supreme Court. He talked about wanting to do a census and redistricting in kind of the conventional order, and the fact that this mid-decade shakeup has been something that he's hoping that the Supreme Court will rule against. Also, he talked about infrastructure cuts for both Democrat and Republican-led states. He talked about working with teachers. Now, this was interesting because, of course, over the weekend, Stacey Davis Gates, who has head up the Chicago Teachers Union, was unanimously elected now to lead the Illinois Teachers Union. It is a major step forward for her. She won election on Saturday. They have over 100,000 members. So we'll talk much more about that, I'm sure, in the day and weeks to come. Also, he mentioned the federal order on the National Guard. And of course, that came down to not federalize them here in the state, even though they had already made it here from Texas. And there were, I think, 400 from Texas, 300 in Illinois, ready, mobilized, but then the judge came down and said that they could not be federalized to actually do any work here in our state, and he talked about states' rights there. So again, he was just taking time out for reporters' questions there at the Rebuild Illinois press conference. We'll talk more about many of these topics as we go about the rest of the day, but we are going to move on right now. We have an interesting topic that we want to get to, unrelated to politics here, or at least to my knowledge thus far. We're going to talk about comets. We're going to, I'm sorry, our producer is speaking. Okay, all right, so we'll talk about comets a little later. We're going to talk about gas right now. The price of gas, of course, is one thing that everyone watches very closely, and we have Molly Hart on the line from AAA, who is going to talk with me a little bit more. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Hi there.
So tell me where we stand right now. I was just in Indiana over the weekend, and I remember the driver saying, man, the gas here is really nice, and noting the difference between Illinois and Indiana. We weren't that far into Indiana. So tell me where things stand for our state right now.
Well, the good news is there's approximately 20 states right now that are below the $3 per gallon, which is great news. Right here in Illinois, where the price is $3.11. It's 29 cents less than a month ago, but when we want to bring it right home to Chicago, the gas price is $3.59, 24 cents less than a month ago. So we're all happy about the savings in our wallet.
We always love to see that. How long do you think we can hold it like that, though?
Oh, I wish I had that crystal ball, but I don't. But there are things that are happening that make the gas prices go down, which is number one, we're transitioning into the winter blend of gasoline, and it's less expensive to make. So that always lowers the price at the pump. We're also post summer, and that's when there's a big increase of what we see at the pump because people are going on their vacations. Right now, people, the kids are in the school year, and no one's taking as many vacations as they were over the summer.
Yeah, and last week we talked with a couple of meteorologists about warming water and this warm weather kind of hanging on for a while, and also La Nina and hurricane season, all of those different types of things, they have an effect on the gas price as well.
They absolutely do. There's things that do play a role in what we pay at the pump. And, if there's a tropical storm and, it's going to be hitting Florida, refineries can shut down, which can cause a domino effect. International wars and conflicts can also pay a price at the pump. And what you also need to realize is the cost of a barrel of crude oil. Right now, that cost is about $57 per barrel. However, when we see the gas prices go up, that is because the price of a barrel is going up. So when we're at the $80 level for a barrel, the prices go up.
Okay, and this is the first time we've hit this $3 mark in 4 years?
We've hit this, yes, in about 2 years ago, actually, as a matter of fact. But, during the pandemic, that's when we definitely saw a decrease of price at the pump as well.
Wow. And why so long?
There's just many different factors that go on. And again, it's what's the price of a barrel of crude oil is. It's a change of the winter to the winter blend. It's also, for refineries out, whether it's here in the Midwest or elsewhere, those can play roles about why the price goes up and down. Right now, we're in a good down place of not having to pay as much.
Yeah, we're certainly hoping it stays that way for a long time. Molly, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, take care. 2:45. Let's take a quick break, and we'll be right back. $2.48 right now, and have you ever just sat outside, kind of looked up and thought, what is out there for me to view tonight? Well, we're going to talk with Michelle Nichols, the Director of Public Observing at the Adler Planetarium, because there's some pretty cool things that are happening in the night sky. Thank you for your time.
Sure, anytime. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. Yeah, so I see 2 comets and a meteor shower. How often do we get this kind of viewing?
Oh gosh, not that often. Even just to get one comet and a meteor shower is pretty rare, but to get two, yeah, it's even rarer. So yeah, it's pretty fun to have some interesting stuff to look at in the sky.
Yeah, and these are newly identified comets. Explain that to me.
Sure. So we have folks with telescopes, either automated scopes or people pointing them themselves, looking for stuff all around the sky. And earlier in January, there was a comet discovered, and there have been many since then, but one in January and then one in September. And both of these happen to be at their brightest about right now. And just a coincidence that that's happening at the same time. So yeah, it's both of them are going to be visible in the early evening sky after sunset. So we can talk a little bit more about where exactly you want to look for that. So go right ahead.
Yeah, so it's Comet Lemon and Comet Swan. Where do we come up with these names?
So comets are either named for the person who discovers them, or in the case of an automated telescope, the name of the telescope. So these two are named for the telescope system that found them. So those kind of sound like strange names, but yeah, in this case, it's named for telescopes.
All right, yeah. And go ahead and tell us the prime time for viewing. Where do we need to be? What time do we need to be there?
Okay, so best place to go is out where it's dark. These comets are not terribly bright. I mean, they are bright compared to most others, but you're still going to be aided by a pair of binoculars if you happen to have one. So go out where it's dark, away from light pollution if you can. About an hour after sunset, face west, a little bit to the northwest, maybe 15-ish degrees above the horizon. You'll see a fuzzy thing, and that fuzzy thing would be Comet Lemon. Another easy way to find it over the next couple days, look for the Big Dipper. You got the curve of the handle of the dipper. The curve of the handle of the dipper points to a star. That star's name is Arcturus. Comet Lemon will kind of be in between the end of the handle of the dipper and Arcturus. So look for a fuzzy thing. And that'll be the brighter of the two. Of the two comets. The other one, Comet Swan, same time, about an hour-ish after sunset, about a third of the way up in the sky to the southwest. That one's going to be harder to find because it's dimmer. So this is where a pair of binoculars are really going to help you a lot.
What if we only have our iPhones?
Actually, that's a great question. Your phone might actually see it before you even see it with your eyes. So point your phone, steady yourself, like put your elbows up against on a fence post or up against a tree or some way to steady your hands really, really well. And then take at least about a 3 to 5 second exposure. Lots of our cameras on our phones do that now. They'll automatically adjust for the light levels, and that'll allow you to take a longer exposure image. And so if you do that, you might actually see the little fuzzy thing in the sky. So try a picture to the northwest first, kind of low. That'd be Comet Lemon. And a little bit higher in the sky to the southwest. At the same time, that would be Comet Swan.
All right. Anything that could hamper this? You know, I don't want to like jazz people up and then they don't know like something, you know, what could hamper our ability to see these?
Two things. The weather, of course. If it's cloudy, nobody's going to see anything. But the other is light pollution, because comets are already harder to find because they're diffuse. The light is kind of spread out a little bit. So it's not like seeing a star, which is just going to be easier on your eyes to be able to see it. So they're already going to be relatively dim, and having that expectation, these are not blazingly bright objects, but they are two comets that are just a little bit easier than your average run-of-the-mill, really, really dim comet that you need a big telescope in order to see. You at least have a chance of being able to see it. So try your phone, try some binoculars, get out under a dark sky if you can.
Thanks so much. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Okay, take care. 2:53. We'll be right back. Okay, 2:55 right now, and on October 15th, a lawsuit was filed in the U.S. District Court of the Northern District of Illinois accusing Northwestern University of violating students' rights, alleging that the university's mandatory training silences Palestinian identity, punishes solidarity, and chills protected political expression on campus. I want to go ahead and bring in Ahmed Rahab of CARE to talk a little bit more about what is happening today. You are hosting a press conference, so who's going to be there?
We're going to have CARE Chicago, our attorneys, as well as our partners from Capitan Gomal Law and Hawks Kindle, to comment on today's proceedings, in which we are asking for a temporary restraining order on Northwestern University's intention to enforce this new sort of process or strategy starting tomorrow. So we want to give that some time in order to litigate our case and not have students be forced to not be able to register for their classes as a result of this strategy.
Yeah, because these students were, as I understand, blocked from enrollment for refusing the training. Is that right?
Correct, which for us violates their Title 6 of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, as well as the Civil Rights Act of 1866, the Section 1981, and the Illinois Worker Freedom of Speech Act.
Mm-hmm. So where do things go from here?
So from here, if this is granted, then we will have time to be able to litigate the larger case without the students having to pay the price prematurely before a decision is made by the court. We do believe that this is of great concern to all Americans, not just to the affected students, because at the heart of this case is the question, should the government be able to pinch the ear of our universities to withhold grant research funding and in order to force them to carry a particular political opinion that they then enforce on their students with the threat of not being able to register for classes they've paid for. This to me is enforcing and indoctrinating a certain line of thinking against the conscience and the freedom of conscience and expression of Americans and others in this country, which is very much against our founding values.
Okay, Ahmed, we appreciate your time. As always, we'll be paying attention to that press conference, and we'll call you up if there are some new developments. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much for staying with us today. We've covered a lot of ground on what's happening here in our city, state, and throughout the country. We hope that we'll see you back here tomorrow at 1 o'clock for more Chicago Live.
When one witness complained that these children are being mistreated, I'm sorry to tell you, the person from ICE said, F them kids. And just last week, ProPublica reported that in the first 9 months of the Trump administration, ICE held over 170 American citizens across the country, kicking, dragging, beating, and detaining some of them for days. Let me repeat, they were American citizens. Take Maria Greeley, a Chicagoan and U.S. citizen detained by federal agents earlier this month in Chicago. She showed them her passport, but they zip-tied her and held her for hours because she, quote, didn't look like someone named Greeley. Let me give you another example. On October the 3rd, Juan Munoz, trustee for the township of Oak Park in Illinois, stood with protesters outside the ICE Broadview processing facility, along with other elected officials. Federal agents picked him out of the crowd, shoved him to the ground, and arrested him while they left his colleagues alone. They held him for 8 hours. Why did they hold Juan Munoz for that long and not his colleagues? He was a person of color. Does this sound like the work of an administration set on reducing violent crime? I think not. This cruel.
All right, Senator Dick Durbin there speaking on the floor as this government shutdown continues. In just moments, everyone, we will be hearing from President Trump live at the White House. We will be bringing that to you as soon as it does get going. But we want to go to some other top stories that we are following for you, including the tragic death of an ex-NFL star, Doug Martin, identified as the suspect who died in Oakland police custody earlier this past weekend. We want to get the full breakdown right now from TMZ. Let's bring in our friends over there, Edward Lewis with TMZ Sports. Great to have you on, Edward, and give us the latest updates, what you are hearing in this case.
I wish I could give you a lot of updates, but frankly, I don't have them. I'm being honest here. I think I've spent roughly 3 or 4 hours making phone calls to officials, to cops, to neighbors, to anybody involved in this. And frankly, we're not getting much. All we know right now is basically what you just stated. At around 4:15 a.m., Doug Martin was allegedly burglarizing a home, and he was involved in some kind of scuffle with cops. And afterwards, shortly afterwards, he died after they placed him in possession or in custody. So I don't have too much more. The one thing I can tell you is after searching a bunch of public records, I do know that he has relatives who have lived or currently live on that street. Outside of that, though, I mean, your guess is as good as mine as to what's going on in this case.
Yeah, so it's obviously very fluid right now, but yeah, it just seems like a bizarre situation that unfolded. And now, again, it's going to take some time usually for the toxicology reports to come to see what, if anything, was in the system as well that led up to this.
Yeah, nobody knows like what even happened. Like, was he in his relative's home that had been on that street? So was this even a burglary? Was it a burglary maybe gone wrong? You know what I mean? Was he just trying to enter his own house or his own relative's house? So there's so many questions here. And I've spoken with one high-ranking source in the Alameda County area, and they told me that the Oakland Police Department currently has a media hold on releasing anything. So we're all kind of at the mercy of the Oakland Police Department and what they want to reveal. They just sent us a statement just a few minutes ago, and that one just basically named Doug Martin. Their initial statement didn't name him. So they've named him now. We're at that point, but still they're saying the family has requested privacy and they're kind of moving forward with their investigation. So
yeah, difficult situation for everyone involved here in this one until more info comes out. But Edward, what do we know about really Doug as the player in the NFL? Maybe tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, he was a first-round pick by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and it didn't take him long to kind of explode into stardom. His first season was great. He rushed for over 1,400 yards and I believe 11 touchdowns. I think he was all-pro that season. The rest of his career, outside of one more year, was a little bit marred. He battled some injuries, and then he battled a suspension where he was accused of taking a banned substance. So there was some great years with him. There was 2 great ones and some not so great ones that were marred by injury and suspension. But the reality was he was one of the biggest fan favorites in the NFL. In fact, his nickname was the Muscle Hamster because he was so bulked up and ran just so aggressively. And he was a big-time fan favorite despite, like I said, only 2 Pro Bowl seasons in 6, 7, 8 years in the league.
Yeah, no doubt. And wow, investigation obviously still ongoing to this bizarre story after those headlines we all saw, and TMZ continuing to break it down. Edward, thanks so much for joining us on Live Now from Fox as the story continues to be just developing right now. Thanks for all the info. We appreciate it.
Of course, anytime.
You too. Take care. All right, we will take a 2-minute break here on Live Now from Fox. We are moments away from President Trump to be making remarks at the White House. We'll be keeping an eye on that. There is also a podium set up just in case any White House officials do want to come outside and speak to the media. So we will continue to wait for the very latest coming up on Live Now from Fox, just moments away from President Trump to be hosting the LSU baseball champions. We'll be back with more on Live Now. Welcome back to Live Down from Fox. I'm your host, Mike Page. Thanks again for continuing to join us here this afternoon, bringing you top stories, headlines, and of course, when breaking news happens, you know we have you covered as well. All right, we are keeping an eye on the White House. President Trump will be making remarks here in just a moment. In the meantime, I do want to take you out to Atlanta, where officials with the city as well as the police department giving an update to a situation that happened over the weekend where a man was threatening to use an AK-47 in the airport. And let's listen right now to the updates coming from this story.
I'm here along with my colleagues to talk about an incident that could have been tragic but was averted. So we're joined here by the COO of this city, our chief of police, as well as Captain Shapiro from Sparacchio from Cartersville Police, as well as our FBI lead, Mr. Brown, as well as our, who else we have back? Oh, we have Ricky Smith from Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport. And we are here to talk about an incident that occurred at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta. Shearbon will give you a lot of details about that incident, but in particular, 27 or more lives could have been lost today because an individual came into Hartsfield-Jackson and after being reported coming out of Cartersville, Georgia, that had mental challenges. This individual, thankfully, his family went to the Cartersville police and shared with them what was going on, and they alerted APD, and APD and the airport were aware, and this crisis was averted. But this individual did have a semi-automatic weapon, and this individual was mentally challenged. And when you have those combinations together, it can turn out to be deadly. People that are mentally challenged, and he happened to also have been a felon from a few years back. So he's a felon with a semi-automatic weapon, and he's got mental challenges, and he's approaching the world's busiest and most efficient airport. This crisis, we're thankful to God and to good information and good intel and good people for this crisis being averted. Just a few weeks ago, we dealt with the CDC shooting that occurred in this city, where another individual coming out of Kennesaw had a mental challenge and a high-powered weapon and ended up killing a DeKalb County police officer and striking the CDC, as well as striking fear into the communities around. We also had an individual just last year in Midtown that was also seeking mental help with his parents, but ended up causing loss of life in that regard as well. We also had a Four Seasons hotel and residence, an individual with high-powered weapons and a mental health diagnosis. So what you're seeing is we are experiencing across the nation and even in this great city where guns and mental health challenges going together can propose a deadly scenario. But we're thankful that in this situation today, this crisis was averted. And so now I would turn it over to our police chief, Darren Shearbaum, to be able to give you more details about all of the aspects of this situation. Chief?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good afternoon, everyone. Appreciate you all being here. As the mayor stated, we are here today to announce an arrest of an individual that posed a threat to our airport, but also to note that because of the community, in the case of the family, as well as the joint collaboration of law enforcement, that a tragedy was indeed averted. The Atlanta airport, the busiest in the world, most efficient, remains safe. Each and every day we have a range of resources in place to keep the airport safe, including our special response team and the many officers that are assigned there. That team trains regularly for scenarios just like today. And I want to thank the men and women of the airport for their response. We have taken in custody and have under arrest a Billy Cagle, age 49, resident of Cartersville, Georgia. At approximately 9:40 this morning, the Atlanta Police Department was alerted by the Cartersville Police Department of a potential threat at the airport. Cartersville Police Department was alerted by the family of Mr. Cagle that he was streaming on social media, that he was headed to the airport, in their words, to shoot it up. And the family stated that he was in possession of an assault rifle. What we didn't know is that Mr. Cagle had already arrived at the airport. In fact, we know that he arrived at 9:29 going to the South Terminal, and that he entered the airport shortly thereafter at 9:31. At that time, we do not believe he was armed. He entered the South Domestic Terminal, and from video we will show you he seemed to be very interested in the TSA check-in area, which you can see was heavily crowded with travelers. At approximately 9:54, officers of this department, armed with a photograph of Mr. Cagle and being provided up-to-date information from their sergeant as she spoke to the Cartersville Police Department and a family member, was able to locate Mr. Cagle and take him into custody. He had arrived at the airport in a Chevy flatbed pickup that was part of the lookout provided to us by Cartersville PD. That vehicle was parked immediately outside. When we went to that vehicle, we found inside a Springfield AR-15 assault rifle, a 5.56 St. Victor model with 27 rounds of ammunition. We did have a tragedy averted today. I, just a short while ago, spoke to two officers of this department and thanked them, because if it were not for Officer Gibson and Officer Banks, and if it were not for their Sergeant Jones that was providing them, I do believe that Mr. Cagle was headed back to his truck to retrieve it, and I do believe he was likely to use that weapon inside the crowded terminal that he had just seen. We are working closely with the District Attorney of Clayton County, District Attorney Mosley, and we have charged Mr. Cagle with a count of terroristic threats, criminal attempt to commit aggravated assaults, possession of a firearm in the commission of a felony, and possession of a firearm by a convicted felon. We're here today briefing you on a success and not a tragedy, because a family saw something and said something. A family knew they had a family member in crisis. They knew they had access to firearms, and they were on social media. This is something we've seen across the country time and time again. Social media postings, people with an awareness, individuals with access to a firearm. But today, the family said something. The local police in Cartersville quickly notified the Atlanta Police Department. And the Atlanta Police Department, using its resources at the airport, took the individual into custody. So today is how it should work. Community, law enforcement, dedicated men and women wearing the uniform and trained to respond when their community needs them. So thank you, Mr. Mayor, for making sure we have the resources to keep our airport safe and keep our city safe. And thank you to the men and women of the Atlanta Police Department, particularly our airport section, for what you did today. And now I'm going to turn the podium over to our representative from Cartersville, Captain Sparcio, for comments from him. Thank you.
Good morning. So this morning, just after 9:30, we were alerted by family members that Mr. Cagle was en route to somewhere in the Atlanta area. They weren't sure. Ultimately, we found out it was the Atlanta airport, and that he had the intention to inflict harm to as many people as he could. We were able to get in touch with the Atlanta Police Department. Our investigators were able to quickly determine what kind of vehicle he was in, get very recent pictures of that vehicle, and get all those over to the Atlanta Police Department in a timely manner, and ultimately get this, what could have been a crisis, averted. And it's because of the hard work, dedication of the excellent investigators we have, the patrol officers that initially took the report, that they were able to take care of that. We are familiar with Mr. Cagle. He's got a criminal history in Cartersville, but again, no one would ever see anything like this. See something, say something really did work.
Thank you so much, Captain. Thank you to Cartersville Police Department for your excellent cooperation and coordination and timely, quickness in telling us about this particular individual and the harm that he wanted to inflict. Thank you, Chief Schierbaum, and your team here at APD to receive that call, to have great relationships across the region, to be able to continue to stay in great contact with individuals and organizations and other police departments across this region so that they would collaborate with us. Thank you all for this. Those in the community, the family, thank you for sharing. See something, say something did work. And so we are standing here talking about a tragedy averted versus us standing here telling you about 27 plus lives that were lost or injured at the world's busiest airport. So I will now take...
I think there's some video we're going to show at this particular time.
Oh, got
it. Maybe a benefit for the
media. If you can direct your cameras to the screen, we have a video. And Chief, if you can just come up and kind of take a look at the video and just walk us through.
Certainly. Again, this comes from the investment that we placed at Atlanta Hartsfield Jackson International Airport. You see the individual arriving. He's parked his vehicle that was given to us by Cartersville PD, the Chevy flatbed pickup truck. They also had a dog in the vehicle with them. This is occurring at approximately 9:29, and then he will enter the airport itself proper at 9:31. He'll be entering top left. You see him right here in the blue shirt, right here. He will go into the TSA area. He has a high interest in that area. And you'll see the number of travelers that are there that are preparing to depart. Our officers, armed with this photograph, are able to pick him out of that crowded area and are able to take him into custody. Mr. Cagle's vehicle is just outside the doors. He was clearly moving to the area that he was scouting and was moving back toward that area. Mr. Cagle was checked out by UMS. They determined he had no injuries, and he would be later be transported to his detention area. And then we're going to have next the weapon that was located inside the vehicle. Thank you, Director Spikes. The officers at this time are handcuffing him. Because of his size, and what you have in the description, they did require to use 2 sets of handcuffs to be able to properly secure him. Fortunately, there were no firearms on him at this time. His weapon is outside in his vehicle.
Chief, what's his size? He's about 6'3".
6'3".
320 pounds.
320 pounds. And again, this is Officer Banks and Officer Gibson there. This is the vehicle, matched the description perfectly given by Cartersville PD. It pulled up right to the south, a domestic terminal, parked here, would go down and go into another door. And then you'll see the officers approaching it, and then they'll recover the firearm, the semi-automatic assault rifle that he had with him. There were 27 rounds that could have been fired from this weapon inside the airport. And this is exactly why we're here today, to encourage citizens to do their part so they ever become aware, and again, acknowledge the family, acknowledge our partners at Cartersville Police Department for their work. Thank you, Captain.
Mayor, at this time we are ready for questions.
All right, at this time we are now ready for questions.
What we will start over here. We'll start with Taisha, and we will move to my left. Taisha.
So this question may be for Chief Shearbell, I'm not sure, but had he just went into the airport with the gun initially, how difficult would it have been to stop him if he didn't do that with like a dry run, maybe to see where he was going to go?
I don't want to go into the full capabilities that we have at the airport. We prepare for this very scenario. We tabletop for it. Our special response team trains weekly for just this occurrence. What you didn't see in the video was close by officers armed with rifles themselves. Any of you that travel through our airport commonly see them in the atrium. That's why they're there. You see officers with sidearms that are ready, prepared to move out. So should that scenario ever rise, as it has elsewhere in the city, we're going to be ready for it through training, for proper equipment and capability. We just pray that we're never called upon to do that. This is what a proper response by citizens and by law enforcement should look like.
Chief, do you know how he got the weapon? Was it a weapon that he purchased legally?
The investigation has been ongoing since this morning.
Right. Very, very scary situation that what could have been at the airport today, but a great job by the police as well as the suspect's family there for telling police that there was an issue with their loved one, and that suspect did have an AK-47 in the truck. And what could have been that situation, very, very bad. All right, let's go out right now live to the White House here. We have President Trump just coming to the podium to honor the LSU World Series champions. Let's listen right now on Live Now from Fox, the LSU baseball champions listening in.
I said, this is my honor. Please sit down. We'll have a little fun, okay? Thank you all very much. Great group of people. This place is crowded. You got a lot of fans. Who do you think is going to make it into the major leagues? Raise your hand if you think that. I guarantee a lot of them, when you hear about their records and their conquests. I want to just begin by saying that we're joined today, two collegiate championship baseball teams from the great state of Louisiana, two teams that were absolutely the top. Both of these teams brought incredible pride and grit and glory to their schools, for the state, and today they're bringing that same Louisiana spirit to a place called the White House. Has anyone heard of it, huh? You know, we're building right behind us, we're building a ballroom. They've wanted a ballroom for 150 years, and I'm giving that honor to this